Sean, thanks very much for joining today and looking forward to your presentation. I can hand over to you now, and yeah, looking forward to seeing what we can learn. Oh, seem to have lost your sound, Sean.
How is that?
Oh, that's better. Yes, can hear you now.
No worries. So how is that in the room? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, I'm just going to stop sharing the screen and then put the laptop in the middle of the. Sorry, sharing my screen. Turn my camera off and put that in the middle of the room. So hopefully it'll be clearer.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Are you okay there? Can everyone hear me all right there? I'll try and speak nice and clearly. I appreciate the Scouse accents might put a few people off as well. So I'll try and slow down as much as I can. So Power Query, dynamic arrays. I suppose first of all, how did I get into it? So I had a sort of a career in finance. I was a group finance director, and part of my role was building out financial models for the entire group. And I just loved that side of it. I loved building models in Excel. I loved kind of planning out the strategy of a business using models and the sort of the interconnected models across a group. So I decided to go all in and just become a financial modeler in Excel. I am a genuine Excel geek as well. So now I just get to build Excel models and financial models. And yeah, it's great. So yeah, I really enjoy it. And yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to share some insights today as well. So I've tried to recreate a kind of a real world scenario. So we've got some data sets and we will combine them in Excel. And then I'll just go through kind of my process and what it looks like in a workbook. And a brief overview is that we're going to have our data coming by a Power Query. We're going to have our workbench where we sort of analyze our data, understand what we're looking at, and pick out these highlights that we want to present to our end user, which might be your board, your CFO, CEO, whoever it is that you're presenting to, and then finally the dashboard. So let me share my screen. And on the screen, there's a couple of folders here. So this is financial storytelling, Power Query data. We've got V1 and V2 here. So if we have a look in V1 and in our financials, we've got January 24, Feb 24, financials March 24. So it's not uniform. We couldn't identify the name of those files very easily, and they might be getting saved by different people. They might be getting exported from various systems, but we want to see all of that information together. Now, if we open up a file and just see what it looks like, once it thinks about it, so we've got a client name, our service type, revenue, direct expenses, overheads, and date. So straight away, a couple of issues with the data. The date obviously is looking very funny over here, a few dates that it doesn't like. I don't like that we have revenue, expenses, and overheads in columns there. So there's a few issues there, and there's a number of issues that as we go through the process, we'll pick them up and we'll fix them in our Power Query, and then we'll use the clean data for our reporting. So let's go blank book from scratch, blank workbook, and good practice. Let's save it so that we don't lose our work. So I'm going to just save that on my desktop as our working book, if I can type correctly. Okay, so we've got our working book. So far, so good. Can everyone see me okay over there in Southampton? And here, are we on track, Ben?
Yes, yeah, we can see me. Thanks, John.
Good, great stuff. Just checking. It's quite difficult sometimes speaking to a blank wall. That's what I can see at the moment. So just checking there's actually people there. I haven't bored you all the way yet.
No, it's good.
Good. So let's bring in our data. So we're going to go to data and get data from file. Now, I'm not going to get an individual workbook because we know that we've got multiple months of data in that folder. So I'm going to take it from a folder.
Sure.
Yeah.
Say, someone online's just asked when, obviously now you're using the folders and things, but when it comes to if you're going to type anything in the cells, if you could just zoom in, please.
Sure. Yeah. No problem at all. So I'm on my desktop and I'm going to select that folder that we were just looking at there. So the V1 version, got our financials, and we can't see the individual files there because we're just selecting that folder. So we're going to open that up. And now what we can see here is those 3 files that were within that folder. So I'm going to combine and transform that data. Now I'll open up our Power Query editor. We want sheet 1 from every file. Obviously, this will be specific to your scenario, but for us, we've got 1 tab in each file, and it's got our financial information in there. So because we're going from a folder, Power Query will take the first file, the first example, and work out how do you want me to present this data, and it creates these helper queries. And all this is saying is that every time there's a new file in that folder, these are the steps that will apply to that folder to create your data. So we can reduce them and just look at our financials. So we've got our file name have been pulled in, client name, service type, revenue, expenses, overhead, and date. So the first thing we want to fix is date here. Refresh my view there. So what's happened here is some of the data, we're missing a lead and 0 here. So it hasn't really recognized it as a date. And then this has defaulted to a strange date, I think like an American date, and it's not really working. It can't recognize the data type either. If I was to put that to date, we've got errors here. It just doesn't like it. So I can see that we just need a leading 0 here, but I don't want a leading 0 on the rows that are totally fine. So what I'm going to do is add a column from examples and call this whatever I want. Let's call it leading 0. So if there's nothing there, we don't need anything there. I want null. If it needs a 0, I want a 0. And what we'll see that as we work through, it's because I've written null there, sorry, excuse me. It will recognize that you don't want anything in front of the dates, but you want a 0 with these data types that are unrecognizable. So if we click OK, and we've now got an error where we have those blanks. So I'm going to right click and replace the errors with null. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Power Query, it might seem like, well, these are a lot of steps. But the idea here is that we're building these steps into our Power Query and we'll never have to touch them ever again. So if we get this right in the first instance, it means that later when we bring in the next quarter's data, there's no changes required to our Power Query. So we want these 0s in front of that. So let's merge these columns. I'm going to merge them as, let's call it date 2. And then we've now got some recognizable dates. That format looks nice and neat. So let's try turn it into a date because it's still got a text type data up here. Turn it into a date, still doesn't like it. It's still trying to force us into that American style date. So let's use that trick again of adding a column from an example from selection, and let's just tell it what it needs to do. So the way I want to see it is that should be the 8th of Feb 2024. That should be the 21st of Feb 2024. And straight away, it's picking up that pattern there. So let's just scroll down and see March. Yeah, March has been picked up correctly. We've now got nice dates that in the UK we recognize, which is good. So click OK there. And we've got our custom column, which if I now turn that into a date, we've got nice formatted year, month, date, UK style dates that work for us. So let's get rid of that date column. And this is our final date column. So I left that in there as a bit of a messy problem that you might encounter with some of your real files in your real working life. And you have to kind of problem solve and come up with a solution to how do I get this data into the format that I actually need it. Now, there's probably 10 ways you could do that, you know. The way that I've done there means that it works for every single row in all of these files. So there's sometimes a little bit of trial and error, and it is something that you have to keep updating. But the beauty of the Power Query is that we can come back and we can look into each of these individual steps that we've applied here. And if we don't like the step or we need to change it, we change that one individual step and that'll be carried through the rest of the entire query. So from this position of having a nice date format, I know that I'm going to be reporting monthly. So I don't care if it's the 9th of the month or the 10th. I just want to know what's the month end date. So a nice quick transformation we can do there is just on the date column, on the date drop down, go to month, end of month, and you can see nice and neat that is just now applied on month end date for each row of data. Now that we've got a nice month end date, I don't need to know what file it came from, so I'm going to remove that column. And also I'm going to change the order of that. I want to see client name, service type, date, and then we've got our revenue, expenses, and overhead here. Now, I don't like that information being in columns. I want to see one table that tells me the sort of the attributes, whether it's revenue, expenses, or overhead, and a value. And the reason for that is then it'll be much easier to reference this table when we're getting into the analysis of the data. So I'm going to keep client name, service type, and date here. And I'm going to unpivot the other columns. And the reason I've done it this way, so I've selected these columns and unpivoted the other columns, is that if we get additional columns of data, we get a depreciation column or whatever it may be, I want all of those value columns to unpivot. So unpivot the other columns, and I've now got a table that tells me client name, what the service is, what the date is, what the attribute is, and what the value is. So I can then quite easily reference just the revenue, for example, without having to worry about a row selector and a column selector. I can just worry about a column selector. So for now, let's use that data. And there's a couple of other little tricks and secrets hidden in the data that we'll encounter as we work through it. So I'm going to close and load that into my file. So now we have a nice data table here. I'm going to get rid of grid lines because that's the way to do it. We don't need to see our queries and connections. We've got a nice table here. So we've got our financials, and the table here is called financials. Now I've got that in my quick access toolbar with a few other things, but if you click table design, you can see your table name up here if you ever need to check it. Because it's so useful to be able to see your table name and know what table you're talking about, I like to have it on my quick access toolbar up here. So you can right click and add to the quick access toolbar if you need to. So next tab, this is going to be our workbench. And the workbench is what it says on the tin. It's where we're going to work with our data. And as if it was a real workbench in real life, your workbench should be tidy, organized, you should know where everything is. So that's the thought process. Data, nice tidy workbench that we're really understanding our data, and it's for our own purposes, and then a dashboard that we're using to present to the end user, CFO, leadership team, whatever it may be. So let's start looking at the data. Straight away, I want to know what's the date range, what period are we reporting from. So we want to know the min and the max. And we're hopefully all familiar with these. So if I was to say, give me the min of the date, and I like a nice format of month and year, nice and understandable. And rather than kind of going through that process, we can just go equals max, start typing the table name, financials, square brackets, and it will give us all of our columns there. So we can pick the date, close the square brackets, close the parentheses. We've got the max of the date. Also, little format painter, drag that down, however you like to do your formatting. Obviously, a few little tricks there that you can copy down the format from the cell above. But yeah, I like to see this to understand the layout of my data. Now, if we're reporting financially, usually what we want to see is all of our months across the top in columns so that we can start to report in the rows what the revenue, expenses, overheads, net profits, whatever it is, sort of below it. So,
sorry, can I just ask you to zoom in, please, when you've got
is somebody speaking to me there? Apologies, because if they are,
sorry,
they might need to be closer to the laptop.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So to say, able to zoom in, please, on those cells.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. I think unless you're very close to the laptop, I just get like muffled sound. So yeah, you have to lean in, Ben, and shout at me. So we now want to produce a dynamic array of our dates. So I would generally use end of month from our start date and the number of months that I want. If we type in 0 here, this is going to give us the month end date of January, which we already know is the date that we've got there. But rather than putting 0, we can put a sequence here. And we don't want it to go down the rows, so leave that blank. And the number of columns, we want it to be the same number of columns as the number of months that we've got in our data set. So to work that out, we can use a date diff, open the brackets, and date diff is start date, end date, and then what you want. So we want months, which is just M in quotes there. If we close that, and our sequence wants to start at 0 because we want the first month of the process. Now that's going to give us something that we don't really want. If I close the brackets there, you can see it's only given us 2 months. And the reason for that is it's gone, your first month's January, your last month's March. So Feb, March is 2 months. So we always want to
Awesome.
as our data set grows and expands, our date is going to spill out for a number of months. But this is a mess, isn't it? It's not a very nice formula. It's a bit confusing. You don't want to have to remember it. So this is where I would definitely wrap this in a lambda. So let's say lambda. And to make it really understandable, we're going to use start date and end date. And what I'm doing here is I open a lambda and I say, what parameters am I going to use in this lambda? So I want to use my start date and my end date because they're the only cells that I reference in this formula. So rather than B2, we're going to use start date. And rather than B3, we're going to use end date. Close with brackets, calc error, and that's because we haven't saved our lambda into our name manager yet. So we take the entire formula, open up our name manager, new name, and I'm going to call this date range and copy in to the formula bar down at the bottom, this formula that we've created. And I think it's always useful to give your lambdas some nice comments. So spills an array of dates from start date to end date, something like that. And what that means now that we've saved that lambda into our named range is that I can now use that date range formula and see straight away it's coming up and telling me that I need start date and end date, which are the parameters that we've given. And if I just reference it, it gives me that little comment as well of spilling an array of dates from start date to end date. So I think that's quite a useful formula, something that I use all the time. It's a great lambda, and we can just go start date, end date, close brackets, and it's going to give you that dynamic array spill of your dates. And obviously that is going to constantly update as your data set updates. I think a really useful one. So what else we want to see? Well, from our financials table, we also want to know what attributes we have. So let's do that. And we've got all of those attributes there, but we don't want to repeat them. So let's wrap it in a unique. So we can see now that our data set includes revenue, expenses, and overheads. Obviously, we're trying to start to build out this P&L kind of structure. So we really want to know sum ifs. We want to add up from the financials, the values, and the criteria range. Well, we want our date to be equal to January for this cell. And we want our attribute to be equal to revenue. Close the brackets, and that gives me the sum of the revenue for January. Now that's good, but we've got a dynamic array up here and a dynamic array down here spilling the information out. It would be pretty useless if we then have to come and copy and paste this formula everywhere to make it work. So what we can do is where we're referencing dynamic arrays, we can put in the pound key or hashtag if you're cool. And that's going to spill that dynamic array for us across the months and the attributes that we have listed. Now, I mentioned there's a few little things hiding in the data. So straight away, I don't want the revenue, direct expenses and overheads to all be the same signage. I want to have a positive revenue and I want negative expenses and overheads. If there are a number of accountants in there, I appreciate I should have credits and debits, but for presentational purposes, I'm going to put my expenses and overheads as negative figures. So I'm not going to change it here. I'm going to come back into my query. I'm going to change it in my Power Query so that I know that I've always got that step included. So I want to multiply my value by 1 or minus 1. So let's add another column, for example. So if it's revenue, I want to multiply it by 1. If it's expenses, minus 1, not 91. And overhead, minus 1. So again, it's picked up that pattern. Let's click OK. And I'm going to custom column. And let's again call this value 2. And we're just going to multiply our value by the custom column we've just created. And we're going to get the numbers that we want. So let's get rid of value and custom. And let's just change this to value. So we've just got our value in the format that we like it. So again, these steps are all saved in here. And then I've got my data in the format that I like it. So I'll close and load. My query will update. Come back to my workbench. I've now got some nice data that has given me then the sum down here, 131, which is our net profit for the period. Obviously, very simplistically. I also don't like that format, so I'm going to update that. And what I like is no decimal places. I like my negatives in brackets, and I like to make sure my numbers are aligned. So I like something like that, giving us 131. So we probably want down here the sum of that column, and we probably want that going across. But again, everything's dynamic. We don't want static totals down at the bottom. So what we can use is a by-col. So this applies a function to each column. So applies the function by column to an array. So our array is our E6 array, and the function, we just want the sum. Close the brackets, and that's going to give us a nice dynamic array that is just summing up each of those columns there. Now, for the purposes of this little P&L, this is fine because I'm not expecting any additional columns down here. I'm only expecting, additional rows. I'm only expecting additional columns across the top. So I'm not too concerned about dropping in this formula underneath the data set. Now, if it was something slightly different, I would always recommend totals at the top and to the left of your data set, because your data is going to grow down and across to the right. So having your totals up at the top makes more sense. So to demonstrate that, let's copy this. So I could fix those dates up there. And rather than our attributes here, let's have a look at the service type that we offer. And this has gone wrong because we're adding up our values based on our attributes being what is in here. We know that we're now looking at service type. So let's change that to service type. And we can see here, we've got cold email, paid advertising, website, events. Well, they're not service types. So what's going on? Let's go and have a look at our data. And this is, we can see, right, we've got marketing expense coming into our data set. So where we have client, service type, date, we've got this marketing expense coming in, which that's not right. We don't want that in our data set. So again, let's change our Power Query. And in that client name column, anything that says, so I've seen something flash up there. Oh, just that comment, make cells bigger, sorry. Marketing expense there. So let's add a text filter and say, we don't want anything that contains marketing expense. Click OK. Close and load. They all disappear. And now we've just got our services: tax filing, consulting, and audit. So we're now looking at those numbers based on the service type, but we don't just want the sum of revenue, expenses, and overhead. I actually just want to see our revenue. So as well as having a service type, I also only want to see it if our financials attribute is equal to revenue. And I'm doing it like this just to demonstrate that you can hard code things into your cells. Now, you may want to say something like that. And rather than having this hard coded in there as text, you're going to reference that cell. You're going to get the same result there. So we can see here, so revenue 327,700, which is our revenue in January of 327,700. And this is a better example of where I would use the sums up at the top of the data set. So I would say by col of this array, give me the sum. And the reason I would do that, let me copy my format there, is because let's say our Westfield Consulting revenue, let's say they start offering payroll as a service. In my workbench, I can see that payroll has then been added in nicely down here, and my totals still work, nothing breaks. If I'd have had my total down here, so this is my total column, and I bring in payroll, it's going to break because it's trying to spill over the cells that are populated with other formulas. So again, just a kind of a best practice. Totals at the top allow your data to go down and across as your data set grows. So we're starting to build out a bit of a view of the data. I know the range, I've got a very simple P&L. I can see what service lines are good for us. But let's just go one step further and have a little look at the clients, and then we're going to build up the dashboard, and then we're done. So we're kind of getting towards phase 3 here. So I want to see the clients in that data set. Check my notes and make sure that is where I'm up to. Yeah, it is. So obviously, old school, we might pivot the table and use a pivot table to have a look at it. I think pivot tables are a bit rigid, a bit static. You need to make sure you go and refresh your pivot table if your data source has been refreshed. The better way to do it nowadays is a pivot by. So if we use the pivot by formula or function, sorry, and I want in our rows down the left-hand side, I want our clients, our columns along the top. I'm going to use dates. My values are going to be my values, and my function is going to be sum, because I just want the sum of that client's value for that period. So again, let's update our format in here and get my number format painter. So if we think about what we're looking at here, we've added up everything that relates to that client. So this isn't revenue, this is net profit per client, because we're including all of those attributes, the revenue, the direct expenses, and the overhead. Now, the reality is you may not have that level of data in your data set, because I'm yet to see a firm that can give me individual client profitability as clean as this. But for the purposes of this demonstration, that's what we have. So looking down the data set, this again allows me to visualize what's going on. And I can see here, DataSphere Inc., DataSphere Inc. dot. So we've got some issues in the data there. Silverline Corp, Corporation. So data quality, a little bit messy. We've got some issues. So Westfield Consultants and Consulting. So let's go and fix them. So again, I'm going to go into the query. I'm going to add this step in. And the reason why I leave these in is I'm just demonstrating that as you spot things in your data set, you don't have to go and start again or change the source data. Come in, add some tweaks into that Power Query, and then it works really well for you. So we know that in our client name, I'm going to replace values here because we've got some wrong values. So rather than Inc. dot, let's just go with Inc. Replace values again. So Silverline Corporation. Let's go Silverline Corp. And I think the last one was consulting with consultants. See if that's right. Close and load. Let's look, we've got one client and 3 numbers across, and that looks right for them all there. So now we have this pivot table that has given us quite a clean visual of the data. And again, this is my workbench. So what I'm doing here is breaking down the data and grouping it into a way that I want to see it to really get to grips with the data set and understand what's in there. So straight away, if you spot some anomalies in here, you can be going, back to the team that are responsible for it and saying, this doesn't look right, what's going on? But for the purpose of this, it looks quite neat and tidy. So I'm happy to use this pivot table. So from this, I think something that would be good to see, well, who's our best client? Who are our best clients? Who are our worst clients? So I want to reference this data set. So let me move this down a bit so we've got some space. Formatting's gone, which is fine. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to build out another really messy formula, and then we're going to wrap it in a Lambda again and see the benefit of using a Lambda with the dynamic query, dynamic array and the Power Query. So I want to end up with my top 5 clients out of this pivot table down here. So I only want the first column and the last column. I'm not too worried about Jan, Feb, and March. I'm just saying for the data, the period that we're looking at, who are our best clients. So I'm going to use, I always get confused at this bit. I'm going to choose columns first. It ends up in a big mess, this one, but it's worthwhile. So from my columns, from my array, I want the first column, which is my client name. I always want that one. And I also want the last column. So I could count the columns and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and go, I want column 5 and close the brackets. But we want this to be dynamic. So rather than counting out those columns, I'm going to say, use the columns function on the array to work out how many columns there are. So always give me the last column, and that's going to return the same output. Let me, in fact, move this over here so you can see what I'm talking about. So now we've got the first and the last columns. Now I don't want the total at the top. I don't want the total at the bottom. So I'm going to use the drop function. So the drop takes an array and drops rows or columns depending on the input parameter you give it. So if you want to drop one row, you put 1. You can see it's dropped the top row. I'm going to do another drop, and I'm going to use -1, and that's going to drop the bottom row. So now I've just got clients and their net profit per client. So I probably want to sort this. So I want to sort my array, sort index. I want to sort it by the second column because that's our value. And the sort order, I want -1 for descending. And that's now ranked my clients by net profit. But I only want to see, let's say, the top 5. So I'm going to take from that array, I'm going to use +5 to give me the top 5. Same methodology as drop. If I did -5, it's going to give me the bottom 5 clients. 1, it's going to be the top 1 client. So give me that. So there's my top 5 clients. Now that is a mess, isn't it? We don't like that at all. So, and interestingly, we only have one input. We're only referencing it in this one array in it. We also probably want to use the 5 as a parameter because we might want top 10, top 20, bottom 5, whatever we might want. So I'm going to wrap this in a Lambda. So I'm going to use A for array, and I'm going to use take for what do we want to take. So rather than saying 5, let's allow that to be a parameter that we can put into our Lambda. I'm going to replace the array with A, and then take all of that. I needed a closing bracket on that one there. Take it all, new name. I'm going to call this take array. And what I'm saying is from this array, show me the top 5 or bottom 5. Spills top or bottom from array. Obviously you can name these whatever you like, and the way that I'm building this out, it might not be the way that you would do it. I suppose what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that we can stack all of these various dynamic arrays on top of each other to produce what we want and to make it work for us. So if I now say take array, well, from this array, I want top 5, close brackets, and I've got exactly what I had before, but I've got now a much nicer formula. So let's say, leave it there for the sake of it. I'm going to say that this is our top 5 clients year to date. And I will center that across the selection because we don't like merge and center. And then I'm going to copy the entire thing over here. Put that back to the array because I hadn't put absolute references in my functions. And rather than the top 5, I'm going to say bottom 5. And these are our worst 5 clients. Now, because the data is quite normal, we haven't got many big issues in there. But let's say, for whatever reason, Trident's advisors here go and do 90 or 900,000 in revenue. Straight away, we're seeing, right, this is going to jump out at us as this is something that we need to be shouting about to our end users. Just to demonstrate there, by the way, that I can type whatever number into this table. It doesn't really matter because I can right click and refresh. I'm going to get the same data back because that's coming from our data source. So in my workbench, I'm starting to get these highlights that I probably want to talk about and present. So let's start building the dashboard. Again, I don't care about grid lines, and maybe on this one, you hide your formula and your headings as well. And really make it look like a dashboard, So let's do like a grey background. And if we start to bring in some shapes, sort of call out cards, we want to make it white, no outline, bit of a shadow. And from the workbench, we've got top 5 clients year to date. Another trick, put a nice formula, a nice font on it, because you're now thinking about your end user. What do they want to see? So I'm going to take that data. I'm going to use my camera and drop it onto my dashboard here. A bit bigger. And no border on that. And also, I'll just group it with the card. And now straight away, I've got this data card that looks good. You can imagine you start to build these out on top of each other of what your data highlights are. And the beauty of having the dashboard as a separate piece, you're not going straight from data to dashboard. You've got your workbench in the middle. So if for 1 month, for whatever reason, you're not bothered about top 5 clients, well, get rid of your top 5 clients and come back here. Actually, this month, we just want to talk about our worst 5 clients because we've got some really bad clients that are just draining our resources. We're not getting a massive return from them. And that's what I want to talk about this month. And, alongside it, you might have another table, and you might bring into that your P&L here for that period of time. Now, this is all well and good. We've spent all of our time doing this. Then we get an email. All the data's changed. We've got the next quarter's data. Do we need to start again? Well, absolutely not. The beauty of everything that we've built out here is that the work is done. So let's say we've had that call. We've got the next quarter's data. We just go to our query. And this is like the wow moment, of, yeah, it all works. And rather than referencing that V1 folder, let's go and say, right, we've got the V2 folder now. And in our financials, let's open that up. Let's see, right, okay, so we've now got May, June, data coming in. We've got another 3 months worth of data. But all of these steps remain the same. We close and load. All of that data comes in. We don't have to change it. It's the exact format that we want to see. So our workbench, other than pulling that formula, the format, sorry, across, this is now spilling dynamically. And this is where you start to see the real benefit of linking these dynamic arrays back to that Power Query, because as that data set grows, your work is already done. You can already get a snapshot of your P&L. You can already see the top 5 and worst 5 clients have updated. We can see our data set down here. Unfortunately, the dynamic arrays don't remember or pick up your formatting. So you are constantly just updating your formatting. But in comparison to what we used to do in terms of updating everything all the time, I think this is much better. And we just flick to the dashboard, we can see that is also updated as well. Looks like we just need to expand those a little bit. And we've got our worst 5 clients there year to date. So that's the process that I would go through. And then this workbench, I would constantly be adding in what are the issues this month that we're seeing? What revenue do we want to present? What highlight needs to come out of that data set and be presented to the end user? And over time, and that's why I referenced at the beginning, keeping your workbench nice and tidy and understandable. You can come in here and when people ask what are our best clients or worst clients, what's our main service type, what produces the highest revenue, well, you've got them here in your workbench. So then you produce that into your dashboard very quickly and easily, and it works really well. So we built this from scratch in the past hour or so. I don't know how long I've been waffling on for, maybe 45 minutes. But let's just take a quick look at what a sort of a finished product might look like. So this is real life SJ Finance model. This happens a little bit because I've done something weird with the conditional formatting and coloring. So yeah, let's ignore them because they are not very nice. But what we can see here is this is almost my workbench to build models off the back of, various different reports and graphs and charts that I might want to take from for budget, for cash, growth, whatever it may be. And if you keep them all on the same, it should nicely flick between them all and looks sort of like a SAS feel to your Excel workbook. Obviously all backed by full P&L here, and that's all supported by your data inputs and your settings, your names, your actuals, all fed by Power Queries for, this is Xero data, this is HubSpot data. So you can see how putting a huge amount of work in the beginning means that I can now use this time and time again and present some good looking dashboards for people very, very easily. So that, I think, is the end of the presentation, but please do ask queries. If there's any ask queries, I've got Power Query on the mind. If there's any questions about any of the functions that we've used there or anything we want to talk about, please go for it.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
I can't hear if anyone else talks other than you, Ben, unless they're in front.
Right. Hi, Sean. Thank you very much. I
Hello.
do have 2 questions based on what you showed just now. So,
Yeah.
and this is drop function. You can drop the first row and the last row, or like how many number of rows that you want.
Yeah.
So, for example, like if a data point that's in the middle of like not on the first row or not on the last row, can I use like other function to actually find the particular data set? So, for example, I might see in the data set that one of the data point is a subsidiary of the company, which I'm not interested in looking at, but they're sitting in the middle.
Got you. Okay, so what I might do for that is, let me share my screen again. If I've got this workbook and obviously we're saying if we've got an array like this, but we don't want to just take the top or the bottom. We just want to see, for example, Highland Associates, say, because that's all we're concerned about. I would maybe just use filter there. And how would that work? I'd probably filter this. Can I filter the pivot by? I can filter the table. So
Could you filter the pivot by the pivot by where one of the columns equals Highland Associates, or not equals to, and also equals,
yeah, I'm struggling to hear the commentary there.
Could you potentially do something like equals filter your pivot by? So you copy that where
this equals, say,
what does not equal Highland Associates.
Alpine Services, for example. Yeah, so that will work. I just don't think it's the neatest. But that would work. But I think what we probably want to do is use filter on the main data set. So I'd probably filter the financials, and then from the resulting array, apply my pivots and my summaries to that. Is the way I think I would approach it. But I think filter is the function that you want to use rather than a take or a drop. Yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Maybe poorly, but apologies.
All right, thank you very much. And the other question that I have is, so you're saying that like have the total row at the top of the table will be a better practice. But I can imagine that, like, for example, if I want to calculate net profit, then people will prefer at the bottom. So I was wondering if you can use function like restack to
totally
stack it at the bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the solution. Is a VStack. I think that's just
an elegant one.
Sorry,
it's not the most elegant solution that I would imagine, but I think
yeah. So I think you just end up with. So if I put my formulas back on. So we've got this formula for our array up here, and then this down here. And if we're then going to VStack them, so let's just say, let's reference them, just that array and that array. So that's going to give you what you want in terms of that function. I do use that. That's a bit of a go-to methodology for me. I think it becomes a little bit difficult to audit because let's say we drop that entire function into the first one, we're probably we're going to end up back where we started. I probably even want to use a let there because in my bicol, I'm referencing this array. So I probably want to do a let. I want my array to be the first function. My array 1 to be that. I probably then want my totals to be the bicol of array 1. And then from a result, I think I want to then VStack array 1 and totals. We'll close the brackets there and show us the result. I think that's what we want to do. No, I've just one too many brackets. Okay, so yeah, that's given us that result there of what we want. So without doing those intermediary steps, obviously what we could also do is bring in the date range and the attributes into this and produce the entire table in one let formula, which we could do for fun if we want to do that. But I think straight away getting into the realms of complexity there, maybe a little bit more difficult to audit. And if there are people who aren't overly familiar with a let or a V stack, you're going to maybe confuse or yeah, but I think it's nice, it's neat. If it's purely for presentation purposes and you're just using it yourself, I think it's a good way to go. And yeah, it'll stay up to date constantly. So yeah, it's a cool way to go about it.
Great, thanks, Sean. Any other queries? Don't know if anyone online has questions. We've had Gene drop off. My question was going to be about the V stack as well, about trying to get the revenue at the bottom. There is a way, but yeah, like you say, it looks pretty scary when you've got lots stitched together. One question actually I've got, and it's something that I have an issue sometimes when I point to a folder and I've got lots of files. First of all, they obviously all need to be in the same format. So they have to have the same column headings, the same width of columns and so on, so that it can append them all together. Or is that not strictly true?
Not strictly true, but again, you are then getting into real complex territory. So yeah.
The one thing that sometimes trips me up though is if they don't all have, so for example, I would assume all three of the files that you had in that folder would have the sheet name of sheet one, because I find if I point to a folder and it's got, say, 3, 4, 5 workbooks in them, they all have to have the same sheet name. And I don't know if there's a way around that in like the M code or something, or you literally just have to make sure they've got the same sheet name.
Yeah, no, you can change that as well. So if we just jump back into the, am I still sharing? Yeah. So when you look into your helper queries here, you can see, so this is saying what's your sample file, and then from your sample file, your source in here, what are you navigating to, so the content of that file, and then in the transformation steps, sheet one sheet here, so it's going to sheet one, so that's where it's picking that up from. Now that doesn't have to be a fixed text field of sheet one. There's a couple of options. You could say it's always the first tab or always the third tab. You could say it's a tab that contains the word results or whatever, so the same logic that we can apply to our functions and our Power Query steps, we can apply that same logic to which sheet we're selecting. But yeah, it just goes beyond a little bit. You're not really just using the interface up here, the user interface. You probably just have to go and change that M code to specify which tab you wanted from each of the files. And if that changes for each file, again, just trying to capture the logic, so there have to be some sort of logic to it of it's always the first tab, that kind of thing, or it's always a tab that includes the name, budget, or whatever it may be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I just find sometimes like if you download, say, a ledger each month and you just want to save it in that ledger folder that Power Query is pointing to, sometimes when you download it from an accounting system, the tab is like June, then the next month you download it, the tab is called July. And I always kind of end up having to just manually change them to sheet one or something like that. But you're right, if you fiddle around with the code up there, there's got to be a way to always say the first sheet or something like that.
Yeah, and so are you adding, so for example, if you got Jan, Feb, March as tabs, you're going to add in...
No. So each month you download, say, the ledger, and it's just one sheet within a workbook, but that sheet is not called sheet one each time. It could be just the month name or something like that.
Yeah, got you. Yeah, definitely. So we can change this navigation step just to bring in, you could even do just all tabs in the workbook if you wanted, and just combine them all. But if there's only ever one tab in there.
Okay, yeah, good to know, because I'd assume for the example you've given here, all the files have just got sheet one on them.
Yeah, just nice and
Yeah,
straightforward.
exactly.
Yeah.
So something to keep an eye out for, and it's good to know there is a kind of Power Query workaround rather than having to rename the worksheets each time.
Yeah, definitely. Smash it.
Cool. All right. Well, great. Thanks a lot, Sean. That was really insightful. I learned a lot from that, and see lots of people scribbling notes away. So it's definitely the kind of more efficient and quicker way of using the modern features of Excel to get things done. So thanks for presenting. That was really good.
Yeah, no problem. Hopefully people learned a couple of things, and of course, if people want to talk to me about it, I live and breathe this stuff. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, and we can have a chat about it. And obviously, if any businesses want a nice looking financial model, hit me up.
Great. Yeah. Thanks a lot. And yeah, I think we can leave it there. So thanks very much, Sean, and thanks for everyone joining online and in the room. And yeah, have a good evening.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, guys. Bye bye.
Cool. All right. Thanks, George. So that's a bit of information for anyone who wants to attend that event in Southampton next month.